Last time we looked at cell behavior in terms of how it might behave in different watery environments, whether it will swell or shrink or stay the same because of osmosis. This session, in Cell Behavior Session 3, we're going to look at some different examples of cell behavior. Cells often communicate with each other using chemical signals like protein or lipid hormones. For example, when pancreas cells release insulin, it's transported by the blood to other cells, it attaches to receptors, and causes the cell to take in glucose, so it changes the cell behavior. Cells can communicate with themselves. Cells can communicate with cells that they are very close to. They can communicate with cells where there's a gap in between, and they'll use diffusion to send that signal across, or they can communicate with cells that are far away and use things like the bloodstream to transport those hormones from one cell to another, which is exactly what the pancreas cell does. It sends out its insulin hormone to cells all around the body, and the insulin attaches to a protein on the surface of the cell and signals the cell to begin to take in glucose, which it will then use for respiration. So how does insulin, which is released by pancreas cells, affect the behavior of other cells, like this cell, which has the insulin attached? It signals the cell to take in glucose, typically from the bloodstream. And what type of chemical signaling does insulin represent? And you can see over here, it's one in which the cell is far away, which is endocrine signaling. That's not the only time a cell's behavior is changed. Taking in glucose for respiration helps the cell to survive. Knowing when to do that makes it more efficient at the process. The stimulus in the insulin example that we just looked at was the insulin. The response was that the cell began to take in the insulin to take in glucose when the insulin attached. Using transport and synthesis of chemicals in the cell, cells regulate things like glucose levels, temperature, and water levels. Let's see if we can figure out which stimulus goes with the response or the cell behavior. When would cells begin to digest their stored glycogen if they're an animal cell, or stored starch if they're a plant cell, or even lipids that they've stored in vacuoles? Why would a plant behave that way? A plant would behave that way if it's low on glucose and needed more glucose, which glycogen, starch, and even lipids can provide. Why would a cell produce heat shock proteins to protect cell structures, or change its lipid membrane to prevent it from solidifying or freezing? Well, that might happen if the temperature around the cell changed and it needed to protect its cell structures. And if there's too much or too little water, what might a cell do? A cell might use its cell wall structure or vacuole for extra support if there's too much water inside the cell. If there's too little, it might even need to use some energy to transport solutes to change the percentages so that water will move in by osmosis. These are all examples of stimulus and response behaviors of the cell based on the stimuli in their environment or inside the cell. But what if it's not just one cell? What if it's many cells working together? In the case of multicellular organisms, the multicellular organism can use special cells in areas of its body to receive information and to signal what the cell should do to maintain homeostasis for the entire organism. So this is a larger cell system, as we've studied previously, than a single cell, but it's going to use the same basic mechanisms. Let's take a look. Why would special pancreas cells release insulin to signal other cells in the body to take in glucose? Well, and that might be because the glucose levels are low. So the stimulus is the low levels of glucose. Why would sweat glands begin to produce sweat in order to cool down the multicellular organism? Or when it's too cool, muscle cells begin to shiver to produce heat. That might happen if the organism gets too hot or too cold. And if there's too much or too little water, as a multicellular organism, it has some additional choices. It can use special kidney cells, for example, to increase or decrease the amount of water that's filtered out and added to the urine, which is released from the body. So as you can see, multicellular organisms have more advanced responses because they have more cells able to do more work as they work together. Some additional examples highlight how important proteins are to our cells' defenses against changes in the environment. Proteins are essential for cell work. Here are some specific examples to how they help maintain homeostasis in the cell by responding to dangers in the environment or preventing problems. B cells are a white blood cell that produce antibodies. Those antibodies are released from the B cells and they act as a weapon against invaders that might cause harm, which we call pathogens. So here we see antibodies being released that will attach to the pathogen and signal other cells to come and gobble it up, or maybe even destroy the pathogen directly. Those antibodies are proteins, and they are produced in the B cell by protein synthesis. Or take another example here, which happens in all our cells. The cells produce special DNA proofreading enzymes to protect against DNA mutations. So here we have an example of a mutation caused by UV radiation. It's a thymine-thymine dimer. And if these two connect to each other, when this DNA is used for protein synthesis or anything else, these will not be able to function in complementary base pairing correctly, and it messes up the code. But cells produce special DNA proofreading enzymes that will spot the problem and correct it, so the DNA is ready for use. Here we have another example related to UV radiation, and that is special cells in the skin of certain organisms are able to produce a protein called melanin. Melanin is a protein pigment. It gives the skin color, but its true purpose is to protect the skin from UV rays so that mutations like this don't happen in the first place. What are the three proteins here that we've listed? They are the antibodies produced by protein synthesis in a B cell, the DNA proofreading enzymes produced by all cells to help prevent mutations that would mess up protein synthesis, and melanin produced by special cells in the skin. Finally, cells often use energy to respond to changes and maintain homeostasis. But how do they get that energy? In a previous presentation, we learned that all cells, plant cells, animal cells, bacteria cells, use cellular respiration to take glucose, which it might have transported in by active transport in response to an insulin hormone. See how this all works together? And it will take that glucose and it will make and break bonds to release energy so it can piece back together ATP that has been broken into ADP and a phosphate. And when it pieces the ADP and the phosphate back together, it produces a molecule called ATP, which it can use to fuel reactions in the cell. What kinds of reactions might it fuel? Active transport, muscle cell contraction, cell division, protein synthesis, or nerve impulse transmission. Without ATP, these things would not be possible. Let's list those 5 processes now. Active transport, which uses energy to move things from low to high concentrations across the membrane. Muscle cell contractions, which use proteins that shorten or relax so the muscle cell can shorten and relax and move bones. Cell division, which we'll study a little bit later. Protein synthesis, which we've studied before, where sections of DNA called genes are used as a code to tell the ribosomes which amino acids to put in which order to make a protein. And nerve impulse transmission, which uses special cells called neurons to send messages and can affect the behavior of the organism. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you next time. In the meantime, have a great day.